What's going on, guys? I'm your host, Jason Grubbs, and this is the Do Not Diminish podcast, the show where we tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Maui, North Carolina, and Southern California. Three horrific examples of why the government cannot save you in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. Let's talk about what we should do to be prepared. This is episode 32. Let's dive on in. Welcome to episode 32 of the Do Not Diminish podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about what we can do to be prepared for disasters. Because as we've seen recently, in the United States at least, the government is just not adequately equipped to help us, especially right after the disaster happens. People are pretty much left to fend for themselves. And I believe the Bible does give us a lot of wisdom and advice on this. We're going to be looking at three different aspects as we go through today's episode. So the first thing I want to say before we hop into it, though, is this is not a shot at the government, nor is it a shot at first responders. It's especially not a shot at first responders because I am grateful for them. God bless every first responder, whether you're a paramedic, a firefighter, a policeman, or serving in another capacity. God knows that these disasters would be way worse. We're talking Maui, North Carolina, California, and others. They'd be way worse without the help of first responders, and there'd be way more loss of life and injury to people and property as well. So this is definitely not a shot at them, but this is the reality that we're dealing with. When we see things like most recently these California wildfires, and I live in Southern California, so I'm kind of used to this kind of threat always being around, this kind of danger. But at least in my lifetime, we haven't seen this amount of damage and this amount of carnage that's happened until recently. So it's one of those things that is very apparent when you look at the Maui fires, when you look at the flooding in North Carolina, and now these California fires. People are pretty much left to fend for themselves, especially right when things are going down. There isn't enough resources to help everybody. They can't get to everybody in time. And you kind of got to know what you need to do before the situation happens so that you can react as quickly as possible. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And I believe the first principle that the Bible talks about that is pertinent to this topic is you cannot rely on man. The Bible teaches us over and over again that relying on man is folly. It's something that doesn't make any sense because man is going to let you down. Our focus and our reliance should always be on God the Father first. Yes, God does use people to help us in certain situations, like we were talking about those first responders. God bless all of them because he's using them to help people. But that's not where we put our faith and our trust in. Our reliance should be on God alone. And there's a good set of verses in Psalm chapter 33 from verse 16 to 22 that I want to share with you right now. And it says, "No king is saved by the multitude of an army. A mighty man is not delivered by great strength. A horse is a vain hope for safety, neither shall it deliver any by its great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let your mercy, O Lord, be upon us, just as we hope in you." And this scripture does such a beautiful job of painting the picture of putting our hope in God alone. Yes, he can use tools, he can use people, he can use all kinds of things to help us, but he's the source from where our help comes. I think of that other verse in Psalms where it says, "I look to the hills, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." And that's where our help comes from. So we should always be in prayer. We should always be asking God for guidance when it comes to what to do in these kind of disasters. And God will help us plan, and God will also supernaturally help us in our time of need should it ever come to that. So we always want to make sure that our faith and our reliance and our hope is in God first, not in man. And the second point I want to bring up is, why is it that the government is so unable to help us? And I believe the Bible sheds some light on this as well. And I believe the main problem, there's obviously a lot of technical difficulties and there's a lot of resource difficulties when it comes to helping a large amount of people, especially in a densely populated area like Southern California. But a large part of that problem is also due to incompetence and people not really caring about what to do in a disaster and trying to save money ahead of time by not putting money and resources where it needs to go so that should something happen, we can be prepared. And I'm not going to get into the political aspects of it, but I do want to get into the spiritual aspect of it. And I believe we can find this in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. And it says, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away." Now, if that doesn't describe a lot of the politicians and leaders that we see in positions of power who are making these decisions to prepare for these disasters, I don't know what does, right? It shows you that they're really looking out for themselves. They're not doing a good job of serving the people, which is what they're supposed to be doing, because they're only looking out for themselves and what they can get out of it in the short term or what they can get out of it in the long term. But their main objective is not to help people. And so that's why we're running into all these issues. And the good part is a lot of it is being brought to light. So hopefully something can be done about it, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It's been like this for a long time. The Bible tells us that, where the world is heading. So on a large scale, we know it's not going to be fixed. Maybe hopefully on a smaller scale, it can be fixed in some local areas. But that is the gist of why a lot of these politicians, they just seem like they're completely out of touch with reality and that they don't care about us as normal people, because they really don't. They really only care about themselves. And until they actually change their actions and change some of the things that they're doing, then we have no incentive or no reason to believe otherwise. And so I wanted to use that verse just to shed some light on why these people act the way they do and why it seems like they don't care, because they don't. And last but not least, I wanted to share a verse from Proverbs. And this verse talks about the importance of planning. It comes from Proverbs chapter 21, verse 5. And it says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty." And I like this verse because it's letting us know that if you're diligent, then you're going to plan. And those plans give you a good chance to be prosperous. But if you just have to be hasty and make quick decisions all the time without having anything thought of beforehand, then it most likely is going to lead to poverty and ruin. And especially in the case of a disaster, when things are going down and things are happening very fast, you don't have a lot of time to think clearly to make good decisions. You need to know what to do already and simplify that process as much as possible. So I would encourage everyone, no matter where you live, there's usually some kind of either natural disaster threat in that area, or sometimes it can be a human-driven threat, terrorism and things like that. But pray on it and come up with a plan for what you and your family need to do in the event that you need to leave where you live to get to safety. So you're going to need to work out things like communication. How are you going to communicate with everybody? What if in the event the cell phone towers are overloaded or they no longer work and you can't use your phone? What other kind of methods of communication could you do? You need to make sure everybody is aware of that plan and agrees to it, so that in the event you can't communicate, that you all know what to do and you just start executing step by step. You need to figure out what kind of food and water resources can you get, and how do you collect those, how do you store them, and how are you going to transport them if you need to move. You also need to figure out transportation. How are you going to get out of wherever you're at? Or are you going to stay and shelter in place and figure out that process as well? So I know this can be a daunting thing. It's not something that we like to think about. I personally don't like to think about it at all. But it is wise for us to do it, because when something does happen, you're going to wish you had that in place. And no amount of, just trying to avoid it or not thinking about it is ever going to actually address the issue. It's better to have a plan and never need it than to need one and not have done it. So I'm going to drop a couple resources. Maybe I'll find a link or two and put it in the description box below. So if you need help, if you don't know where to start, you can look there. But I pray that you all, no matter where you live, I pray that you're safe and in good health. And I pray that you do come up with a plan just in case things go crazy, because we are these end times and we just never know what's going to happen when. So most importantly, stay prayed up. God will guide you to do what you need to do, and you do your part. So until the next time, I hope you guys have a blessed week. Peace.